The day I told my 3 children they wouldn't be getting a single penny of my inheritance, I watched their masks slip off one by one. What happened next revealed everything I needed to know about who they really were, and who I had failed to become as their father. I'm 68 years old, sitting in my study in our family home in Westchester County, New York. Outside, the autumn leaves are turning the same golden brown as the whiskey in my glass. This house, worth $3.2 million, has been in our family for 37 years. The kids grew up here, learned to ride bikes in that circular driveway, had their graduation parties in the backyard that overlooks the Hudson Valley. But here's what they didn't know. 6 months ago, I made a decision that would change everything. A decision that would strip away every pretense, every fake smile, every "love you, Dad" that came with an ulterior motive. You see, I had discovered something about my children that shattered every belief I had about the family I thought I'd built. Something that made me realize I had raised 3 strangers who saw me as nothing more than a walking inheritance check. The revelation came during what was supposed to be a simple family dinner. What I uncovered that night wasn't just disappointing, it was devastating. And it led me to make the most difficult decision of my life, to test them in a way that would reveal their true character once and for all. What happened when I dropped that bombshell about their inheritance? Their reactions didn't just surprise me, they changed the course of our family forever. And the secret I was hiding? Well, that changed everything too. This is the story of how one dinner conversation destroyed a family, and maybe, just maybe, saved it. My name is Robert Henley, and for 43 years, I've been what you'd call a successful American father. I built Henley & Associates, a consulting firm that grew from my basement office in 1981 to a company with offices in Manhattan, Boston, and Chicago. My wife Margaret and I raised 3 children in the kind of suburban perfection that looks beautiful from the outside. Margaret passed away 2 years ago from cancer. She was the glue that held our family together, the one who remembered birthdays, organized holidays, and somehow made our house feel like a home instead of just an expensive address. Since her death, I've watched our family dynamics shift in ways that should have been warning signs. My eldest, James, 35, is a corporate lawyer in Manhattan. He inherited Margaret's sharp intellect but somehow missed her compassion entirely. He's married to Catherine, a woman who measures everything by its price tag and refers to our family gatherings as networking opportunities. They live in a penthouse on the Upper East Side and have 2 children they see mainly on weekends between business trips. Then there's my daughter Sarah, 32, who followed the classic pattern of American overachievement. MBA from Wharton, works in private equity, drives a Tesla, and talks constantly about optimizing everything from her workout routine to her relationships. She's engaged to Marcus, a hedge fund manager who once asked me if I'd considered monetizing the family brand. Sarah has always been competitive, but somewhere along the way, that competitiveness turned cold and calculating. My youngest is Michael, 29, the family's designated creative type. He's bounced between art school, a failed photography business, and various startup ideas that never quite launch. He still lives in Brooklyn, shares a converted warehouse space with 3 roommates, and calls himself an entrepreneur while asking me for money every few months. Growing up in suburban New York, appearances mattered. I remember James's high school graduation party in 2005. We'd rented a tent for the backyard, invited half the neighborhood. James gave a speech thanking Margaret and me for investing in his future success. Even then, at 17, he was already thinking in transactional terms. While other kids thanked their parents for love and support, James thanked us for investments and opportunities. The humiliation I felt that day wasn't from James directly, it was from overhearing 2 neighbors discussing how lucky we were that our kids were so financially aware. One of them actually said, "Those Henley kids know the value of money. They'll never take their inheritance for granted." The assumption stung because it revealed what everyone really thought about our family relationships. Another incident happened during Sarah's college years. She was home for Thanksgiving 2011 and brought her roommate from Wharton. Margaret had spent 2 days cooking, creating the perfect family dinner. Sarah spent the entire meal explaining to her roommate how our house's property value had appreciated, how my business had grown, and what her expected net worth trajectory looked like after graduation. Her roommate looked uncomfortable, but Sarah was oblivious. She was treating our family dinner like a business presentation, with Margaret and me as the featured assets. But here's the thing about my children that really got to me. They had mastered the art of the grand gesture. Every Father's Day brought expensive gifts, watches I didn't need, golf accessories for a sport I rarely played, bottles of wine that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. They knew exactly how to make their affection look generous while remaining completely surface level. Christmas became a competition of who could spend the most money rather than who knew me best. The secret I was carrying, the one that would eventually change everything, began with a conversation I overheard 6 months ago. But I need to be honest with you about something first. I had started to question everything about how I'd raised them years before that conversation happened. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching this from? I'm curious how family dynamics play out in different places, because what I discovered about my own family made me wonder if this is uniquely American, or if it's something happening everywhere. The family gathering was supposed to be a celebration. It was the 2nd anniversary of Margaret's death, and instead of mourning, I wanted to honor her memory with the kind of dinner party she loved hosting. I invited all 3 kids and their partners to our house for what I told them would be a special family announcement. The preparation took weeks. I had our housekeeper Maria prepare Margaret's favorite recipes, her famous herb-crusted lamb, the potato gratin she made every Christmas, and her signature apple tart that the kids used to fight over. I even brought out her good china, the Waterford crystal we'd bought in Ireland on our 25th anniversary trip. James and Catherine arrived first, exactly 15 minutes early as always. Catherine immediately started photographing the table settings for her Instagram, talking about how gorgeous everything looked while calculating the value of the china out loud. "This set must be worth at least 15 grand now," she announced to no one in particular. James kissed my cheek and handed me a bottle of wine, a 2015 Bordeaux that probably cost $300. "Thought we should drink something special tonight, Dad?" he said, already scanning the room like he was taking inventory. Sarah and Marcus arrived in their Tesla, which Marcus parked deliberately in front of the circular driveway where everyone could see it. Sarah hugged me and complimented the house's staging, as if I'd arranged my own home for a real estate showing. Marcus immediately started talking about interest rates and property values in Westchester, suggesting I consider refinancing. Michael showed up 40 minutes late, which was actually early for him. He'd taken the train up from the city and looked genuinely moved by the dinner setup. "Mom would have loved this," he said quietly, and for a moment, I felt a spark of the connection I'd been missing. But as we sat down to dinner, the conversation quickly shifted to familiar territory. James started talking about a case he was working on, some merger worth hundreds of millions. Sarah jumped in with stories about her latest deals, name-dropping clients and throwing around numbers like confetti. Marcus contributed market analysis and investment theories. Catherine documented everything for social media. The tension started building when Michael mentioned he was thinking about going back to school, maybe getting an MFA, exploring a master's in sustainable design. The table went quiet. "How much would that cost?" Sarah asked immediately. "And what's the ROI on creative degrees these days?" added Marcus, as if Michael's life was a stock portfolio. James leaned back in his chair. "Mike, you're almost 30. Don't you think it's time to get serious about building actual wealth instead of chasing these artistic fantasies?" I watched Michael's face fall. This was the same pattern that had been playing out for years, the older two treating their younger brother like a disappointing investment, measuring his worth by their standards instead of his own happiness. But then something shifted. Catherine, who had been relatively quiet, made a comment that changed the entire evening. She was looking around the dining room at Margaret's antique furniture, at the family photos lining the walls, when she said, "You know, Robert, have you thought about what's going to happen to all of this?" The question hung in the air like smoke. "I mean," she continued, "with estate taxes the way they are, and 3 kids to think about, James and I have been talking to our financial advisor about inheritance planning. There are strategies to minimize tax exposure, trust structures that could save hundreds of thousands." Sarah immediately perked up. Oh, Catherine's right. Marcus and I have been looking at similar strategies. Dad, we should really sit down with our people and run some numbers. James nodded enthusiastically. We could set up a family-limited partnership, maybe create some charitable remainder trusts. There are ways to structure this that benefit everyone. I sat there watching my 3 children and their partners discuss my death and my money like I wasn't even in the room. They talked about liquidity events, and asset protection, and wealth transfer optimization. Margaret's beautiful dinner grew cold while they planned how to divvy up everything we'd built together. Michael finally spoke up. Jesus, you guys. Dad's sitting right here. And this is Mom's anniversary dinner. We're trying to help him, Michael, Sarah snapped. This is called being responsible adults. That's when I made my decision. The secret I'd been carrying, the one that had been eating at me for months, suddenly felt less important than what was happening right in front of me. My children had just shown me exactly who they were, and it wasn't pretty. I stood up from the table, walked to my study, and came back with a folder of documents. My hands were shaking, but not from nerves, from anger. If you're enjoying this story and want to see how it ends, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, and your support helps us share more real family stories like this one. Because what happened next changed everything. I placed the folder on the table between Margaret's untouched apple tart and Catherine's phone, which was still recording everything for her social media story. The room fell silent except for the grandfather clock in the hallway, Margaret's favorite piece, the one that had belonged to her grandmother. Since you're all so interested in inheritance planning, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I thought tonight would be the perfect time to discuss your futures. James leaned forward with that lawyer expression he'd perfected, interested but controlled. Dad, we didn't mean to pressure you. We just want to make sure everything's handled properly. Oh, it's handled, I replied, opening the folder. I've spent the last 6 months working with my attorney, my financial advisor, and my accountant. Everything is perfectly organized. Sarah's eyes lit up. She actually rubbed her hands together. That's great, Dad. Smart planning. What kind of structure did you decide on? I pulled out the first document, a revised will, signed and notarized just 3 days earlier. I've decided to leave my entire estate to charity. The words landed like a physical blow. Catherine's phone clattered onto her plate. Marcus choked on his wine. James's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Every penny, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. The house, the business, the investment accounts, the life insurance policies, all of it goes to the American Cancer Society in your mother's name. Michael was the first to speak. Dad, are you serious? Dead serious. No pun intended. I turned to James. Your inheritance? $0. Sarah? Michael? Nothing. The explosion was immediate and spectacular. You can't be serious. Sarah slammed her hand on the table, rattling Margaret's good china. Dad, this is insane. We're your children. James stood up so fast his chair fell backward. This is ridiculous. You're clearly not thinking straight. Grief can cause people to make irrational decisions. We need to discuss this with your doctor, maybe get a competency evaluation. Don't you dare. I cut him off. There's nothing wrong with my mental state. In fact, it's clearer than it's been in years. Catherine was frantically texting someone, probably her financial advisor. Marcus had pulled out his phone and was mumbling about legal challenges and estate litigation. But it was Sarah's reaction that really revealed everything. She looked at me with pure calculation and said, "How much are we talking about? What's the total value you're just throwing away?" Sarah. Michael shouted, "Did you just ask Dad how much money he's not giving us? This affects all of us, Michael. Some of us have actual financial responsibilities." "You mean some of us are greedy?" James jumped back into the argument. "This is emotional manipulation, Dad. You're punishing us for caring about your financial security." Caring about my financial security? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. James, you just spent 20 minutes discussing how to structure trusts to minimize taxes on my death. You're not worried about my security, you're worried about your inheritance. That's not fair, Catherine interjected. Estate planning is responsible. We're trying to preserve family wealth. Family wealth? I stood up, looking at each of them. What family? When was the last time any of you called me just to talk? When was the last time you visited without asking for money or discussing business opportunities? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I'll tell you when, I continued. It was at your mother's funeral. And even then, James, you spent the reception networking with the other mourners. Sarah, you handed out business cards. And Catherine, you took selfies at the cemetery. That's not, James started. Don't. My voice carried a finality that stopped him cold. I heard you 6 months ago. All of you. You thought I was napping in my chair during Easter dinner, but I heard every word. The color drained from their faces. You discussed selling this house before I'm even dead. You debated whether to put me in a really nice assisted living facility so you could liquidate my assets sooner. Sarah, you actually said that keeping me at home was inefficient allocation of resources. Sarah's face went white. Dad, we were just planning my life like I was already gone. Like I was just an inconvenient obstacle between you and my bank account. I walked to the window, looking out at the driveway where their expensive cars sat like monuments to their priorities. Your mother spent 43 years building a family. You've spent the last 2 years planning its liquidation. Michael was crying now, quiet tears that he tried to hide. James and Sarah looked stunned, like someone had just told them the sky was falling. Catherine and Marcus looked like they were already planning their exit strategy. So yes, I said, turning back to face them. I'm leaving everything to charity. Every dollar you were counting on will go to fight the disease that took your mother. Maybe it'll help some other families stay together longer than we managed to. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. I want you all out of my house. Tonight. Don't call me unless someone's dying, and even then, think carefully about whether it's worth interrupting your busy schedules. As I left the dining room, I heard the chaos erupting behind me. Shouting, accusations, the sound of chairs scraping against hardwood floors. But I didn't look back. In my study, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and listened to my children destroy what was left of our family dinner. Through the window, I watched them storm out one by one, car doors slamming, engines starting, brake lights disappearing into the night. For the first time in months, the house felt peaceful. The aftermath hit like a hurricane. Within 24 hours, my phone exploded with calls I didn't answer. James left 17 voicemails, each one more lawyerly and threatening than the last. Sarah sent a barrage of texts ranging from desperate apologies to cold calculations about family mediation and conflict resolution strategies. Michael, surprisingly, sent just one message. Dad, I'm sorry. Can we talk? By day 3, Catherine had posted a cryptic Instagram story about family betrayal and ungrateful parents, though she was careful not to mention specifics. Sarah's LinkedIn had a new post about navigating difficult family dynamics in wealth management. James, ever the lawyer, had already contacted my attorney demanding to see the will and threatening to challenge my mental competency. The first person to actually show up at my door wasn't one of my children. It was Maria, our housekeeper who had worked for us for 12 years. She brought homemade soup and sat with me in the kitchen while I told her everything. Maria, who had immigrated from El Salvador and sent money home to support her own 3 children, listened without judgment. Mr. Robert, she said in her gentle accent, your children, they forget where they come from. Sometimes people need to remember they are not entitled to everything. It was Maria who told me something I hadn't known. During the months after Margaret's death, when the kids came to help me organize, they had been taking things. Small things, valuable things. Sarah had taken Margaret's jewelry box, claiming she was protecting it. James had removed several of my business awards, saying he was having them professionally cleaned. Michael, ironically, was the only one who had never taken anything without asking. The real shock came 1 week after the dinner, when Michael arrived at the house unannounced. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept since that night. He stood in the doorway holding a small wrapped package. "Dad, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice shaking. "That conversation you overheard at Easter? I wasn't part of it. I went to the kitchen to help Maria clean up because I couldn't stand listening to them anymore. I invited him in, and we sat in the same living room where I used to read him bedtime stories when he was 7 years old. James and Sarah have been planning this for months," he continued. "They've been meeting with financial advisors, talking about power of attorney, even discussing interventions if you started making poor decisions with your money. They wanted me to be part of it, but I couldn't." He handed me the package. Inside was a photo album, one I'd never seen before. Page after page of pictures Margaret had taken but never put in the family albums. Pictures of me teaching Michael to ride a bike. Pictures of quiet moments, Margaret and me working in the garden, family dinners where we were actually talking instead of performing, candid shots of all of us just being together. "Mom was making this for you," Michael said quietly. "She wanted to surprise you for your next anniversary. I found it in her craft room after she died, but I couldn't bring myself to give it to you until now." As I flipped through the pages, I saw something that made my breath catch. It was a handwritten note from Margaret, tucked between photos from Michael's college graduation. The note was addressed to me. "My darling Robert, if you're reading this, it probably means I'm gone and you're wondering if we failed as parents. We didn't. James and Sarah lost their way, but they can find it again if they want to. Michael gets it. He understands that family isn't about money, it's about showing up. Don't give up on any of them, but don't let them walk over you either. You're stronger than you know. Love always, I broke down completely. Michael held me while I cried for the first time since Margaret's funeral, not just for losing her, but for losing the family I thought we had built together. "Dad," Michael said after I composed myself, "I have an idea. But first, I need to ask you something. Are you really going to give everything to charity?" I looked at him, this son I'd underestimated, who had been struggling to find his path while his siblings plotted their inheritance. "What would you do, Michael?" "I'd test them," he said. "Really test them. Give them a chance to prove who they actually are when they think there's nothing in it for them." That's when Michael revealed the unexpected twist. He had been documenting everything, not for social media or evidence for a legal challenge, but because he was making a film about modern American families and wealth. His failed art career wasn't actually failing. He had been secretly accepted to the MFA program at NYU, with a full scholarship, and his documentary project was being funded by a grant from the Sundance Institute. "I've been filming family gatherings for 2 years, he explained. I wanted to capture who we really are, not the version we perform for each other. Mom knew about the project and helped me with it before she died." He showed me footage I never knew existed. Christmas dinners where James and Sarah calculated gift values. Birthday parties where they discussed my succession planning. Family vacations where they treated me like a walking ATM. But he also had footage of the real moments, Margaret teaching Sarah to make pie crust, James helping me fix the garden shed, quiet conversations where they revealed their fears and dreams instead of their financial projections. "They're not evil, Dad," Michael said. "They're lost. They've been playing this game of wealth and success for so long, they forgot how to just be human." We spent the next 3 weeks developing what Michael called the Reconciliation Project. Instead of simply disinheriting James and Sarah, we would create a situation where they could choose who they wanted to be, without the promise of inheritance influencing their decision. I would stick to my announcement about the charity donation, but I wouldn't finalize anything for 6 months. During that time, I would need help managing my affairs as I dealt with some health concerns that were real enough, some heart palpitations my doctor was monitoring, but not immediately serious. The question was whether James and Sarah would show up to help their father or continue trying to manipulate the situation for financial gain. Michael would document everything, creating a record not for public humiliation but for family healing. If his siblings proved they could rediscover their humanity, the inheritance would be restructured. If they couldn't, well, the American Cancer Society would receive a very generous donation in Margaret's memory. "This isn't about the money, Dad," Michael explained. "It's about giving them permission to remember who they used to be before they became so afraid of not having enough." As we planned this final test, I realized something profound. Margaret's note was right. I hadn't failed as a parent. But I had failed to set boundaries, failed to demand better from my older children when their love became conditional on my wealth. Now, with Michael's help and Margaret's wisdom guiding us, we were going to find out if it was too late to save what was left of our family. The grand gesture, that expensive dinner meant to honor Margaret's memory, had been destroyed. But maybe, just maybe, we could build something real from the wreckage. 3 months into the reconciliation project, the results were both heartbreaking and illuminating. When I called James and Sarah to tell them about my heart palpitations and asked if they could help me manage some affairs, their responses told me everything I needed to know. James immediately wanted to discuss power of attorney arrangements and suggested I might want to simplify my financial portfolio while I was still capable of making decisions. Sarah offered to temporarily oversee my investment accounts to reduce my stress. Both of them showed up to my next doctor's appointment not to support me, but to speak privately with the physician about my cognitive state and decision-making capacity. Michael, meanwhile, simply showed up. He moved back home temporarily, cooked dinner with me every night, and helped me sort through Margaret's belongings without once asking about their value or suggesting we liquidate assets. When I had a minor cardiac episode that landed me in the hospital for 2 days, Michael slept in the chair beside my bed. James and Sarah visited once, spent 20 minutes discussing medical power of attorney, and left to attend more pressing meetings. The footage Michael had been capturing revealed the stark contrast. While James and Sarah performed concern when they thought he was recording, their private conversations with each other, caught on hidden microphones, were purely strategic. They discussed timeline scenarios for my likely death, debated whether to contest the will or try to have me declared incompetent, and calculated how much money they were losing every day the charity donation remained in effect. But here's what surprised me. Watching that footage broke my heart in a way I hadn't expected. Because buried beneath all their scheming and calculation, I could see the children they used to be. I saw James's desperate need for approval transformed into an obsession with success. I saw Sarah's natural intelligence twisted into cold manipulation. They weren't evil, they were terrified. Terrified that they weren't enough without their wealth, terrified that their father's love was as conditional as they had made their own. 2 weeks ago, I made a decision that surprised even Michael. I called James and Sarah to the house for what I told them would be a final conversation about the will. When they arrived, both with lawyers in tow, I had all of Michael's footage set up on the big screen in the living room. "I want to show you something," I said. "I want you to see yourselves the way I've been seeing you." For 2 hours we watched together. We saw the Christmas where 8-year-old James gave me a drawing instead of an expensive gift. We saw teenage Sarah helping Margaret in the garden, talking about her dreams of changing the world. We saw the gradual transformation as success and wealth became their primary languages for expressing love. By the end, all 3 of us were crying. James spoke first, his lawyer's composure completely shattered. "Dad, I don't know when I became this person. I don't know when your love started feeling like something I had to earn instead of something I just had." Sarah was quieter, but her admission cut deeper. "I've been so afraid of not being successful enough for you that I forgot how to just be your daughter." That conversation led to another, and then another. We started having family dinners again, real ones, where phones were banned and we talked about feelings instead of finances. James and Sarah both entered therapy. Catherine, ironically, couldn't handle the change and filed for divorce. Marcus stuck around, but had to learn an entirely new way of relating to Sarah when money wasn't the foundation of their conversations. The inheritance? I restructured it, but not the way any of us expected. The house and half my assets still go to charity in Margaret's name. The remaining half is split 3 ways, but it comes with conditions. Each of my children has to spend 1 year doing volunteer work in a field that matters to them, and they can't access their inheritance until they can honestly say they'd love me the same way if I were broke. Michael used his inheritance early. I gave him what he needed to finish his documentary and start his MFA program. His film, tentatively titled The Price of Everything, will premiere next year at Sundance. James quit his corporate law job and now works for a legal aid society. Sarah left private equity and is developing financial literacy programs for low-income families. Here's what I learned. Humiliation and triumph aren't opposites. They're partners in the dance of real growth. My children had to face the humiliation of seeing who they'd become before they could experience the triumph of choosing who they wanted to be. And I had to face my own humiliation, that I'd enabled their worst impulses by never demanding better, before I could triumph by finally being the father they needed instead of the ATM they wanted. Margaret was right. We didn't fail as parents. But success isn't measured by how much wealth you accumulate or transfer. It's measured by how much love you're willing to give and receive without conditions, how much truth you're willing to face, and how much courage you have to change when change is needed. Today, when my children visit, they come empty-handed and leave full-hearted. They ask about my day, share their struggles, and sometimes we just sit together in comfortable silence. We're not the perfect American family we used to pretend to be, but we're something better. We're real. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to choose love over fear, authenticity over performance, and connection over control. Let me know in the comments about your own family dynamics, the good, the challenging, and everything in between. Remember, the greatest inheritance you can leave your children isn't money, it's the example of how to be courageously, completely human.